Hey there guys, this is Obsidian Chill. Got another video for you today. And in this one, I'm going to be taking a look, I'm going to be addressing my feelings and addressing the concept of DC being a Bountyverse Online game now. And towards the end, I'll probably, or towards the commentary, I'll probably get mixed in with like a review of the DLC. But I want to focus more on talking about the bounties. Because that seems to be the direction that we're taking for the game. And I believe it's a heavily negative direction, the way they have it planned out. So let's kind of wind back to last DLC with Wonderverse. So we had 4 new bounties introduced and basically Hydra at the end. So basically 5. It's a new concept where we've had open world bounties before, but it's usually just been one. We farm it for one mission. We get some marks. That's it. So now they changed it towards now we have to do the bounties not only for marks, but we also have a new type of currency that are related just to the bounties. And the way they sold this to us was that it's completely free. You don't have to reset it. So you could do the bounties all day long. Doesn't matter. You're always going to get marks, which you can use to help purchase currency, or like generator mods or stuff like that. So that's the main selling point where they say that there's something always to do in the game because the bounties are always going to be free and they're always going to reward marks no matter what, no matter what, if you're like a weekly lockout. So that was the main selling point, which sounded interesting at the time. Now, the issue is that when you started to break down the math, and when you looked at the prices, the reason why the prices are so large, and when you looked at the time investment, was because of that freedom. So, since you didn't have to reset anything, you could just keep doing it. Obviously, they had to have the prices high, or everything would just be done so quickly. But then, I'm not sure how they kind of determine that, time versus investment or time versus reward formula, but it was a little bit hectic. So I forget the exact numbers of the Wonderverse. Somebody can put that in the comment section. I believe the OP grind for like the OP head, which is like the 3 catalysts there, was around 17-ish hundred marks. I think it was over 1700, but it was less than 1800. So this was also a new thing. So we had the OP item completely being tied to bounties and tied to catalysts where you could buy. So before in DLC you had to grind the marks. You had to spend like 600-700 marks worth of DLC currency on the OP catalyst to rank that up in the legs, back, whatever. And then the outside catalyst that you needed as well that would drop in content. But now you didn't need that. The only thing you needed was these catalysts and the outside content as well. But like the outside catalysts as well that dropped in like the raids and open world stuff like that. But these catalysts you could farm completely, so it's you don't have to reset. You could completely farm it out. So when people were doing the math, it was like, hey, we get 48 marks per rotation. It takes half an hour per rotation, and we need 2,000 marks. It changes the way you look at not even the OP items, but in gear in general. So it changes the way you look at it. Instead of saying, oh, I need like 200 marks for this, I'll get like 10 runs, I'll use resets, we're good. No, with the bounties, it's like, okay, I have to farm 20 hours worth of bounties, and then I'll be okay. Yeah, that's not an asterisk. So I have to log into the game and spend 20 hours to do this. And that's exactly what I did. I mean, I work till 5 o'clock Eastern each day, so I'm a 9 to 5er. So I'd come home, I'd eat, I'd log on the EU server because that's where I was playing at that Wonderverse, and then I'd basically start a bounty rotation. So I would start getting a bounty group after getting phase full like 50 different times because the EU's smaller. So there's really only like 3 or 4 phases going on, and then I would put movies up on my second monitor. And that's how I would do bounties. I would do that till server shutdown, which server shutdown on the EU server is about 11 o'clock Eastern. So each day I would get about 5-6 hours worth of bounties, and then that would be my entire week. Go to work, you wake up, go to work 9 to 5, come home, eat, do bounties for 5-6 hours. And that's the way you had to do it if you wanted the OP head. There's no shortcut. You could wait for like a double or triple Aether weekend or Time Beacon weekend or whatever, but that's not. I'm sure that's how some people do it to maximize their time, but that's not how I do it. I like to not necessarily rush to the full gear, but I like to make sure I'm fully geared and get the weapon and stuff like that so I can run the elite content better. So that's what my focus is, and that's what the focus of most endgame players are. You'll see them all with the OP faces already, stuff like that. So, it's not uncommon for us to do that. And DC knows that. The DC knows that there's plenty of players that drop like tons of replay badges in the first few days just to grind their set out or grind their renown. I mean, that's not uncommon. That's been around since the beginning, since replays came out. But this whole like needing multiple hours, it's daunting because you're doing the same thing over and over again. It's 4 bounties, and then you had Hydra at the end. Then you had to wait like I think it was it 3 or 4 minutes between each rotation, and then it was like another like 8 to 10 minutes after you defeated Hydra until Merc would spawn. So like the whole rotation took about half an hour. So that's why when you do it, I need like 60 rotations of this, and it's like 30 minutes per rotation. So I'm looking at like thousands of minutes, and then you divide the thousands of minutes by 60 minutes in an hour, and then you're like, oh, okay, great. So I'll have this done in 14 hours. So I mean, I understand that other MMOs might be like that. I mean, I don't have much experience with that, but I understand the concept of like a grindy MMO. But in terms of content, it's just it didn't work out in practice. So I thought that was a lesson they learned from Wonderverse, because they specifically asked for that type of feedback on these test server forums. They had the play test in terms of on these bounties. I wasn't part of that because it happened during the day. But I thought, I mean, I didn't test it much because I'll get into this a little bit later in the commentary in terms of like what a cluster F word that this test server was. But I figured I was going to rely on the community to sort this bounty stuff out, because it seems like that's like the general consensus I get for this entire episode of Long Live the Legion is that this is all about the bounties and all about open world in the new Metropolis, and then everything else is an afterthought. It's like we did these brand new bounties. We got three of them, and we got Vladis, and we got this old open world, and we got new missions, and then it's like, oh yeah, we need like an alert in a raid. So I mean, kind of throw that together. So it's like I feel like the alert and raid were complete afterthought. It was second nature. They probably threw it together at the last minute because that's the way it feels like. And once again, I'll touch on those specific points a little bit later in the commentary. I want to focus on the bounties, but I figured I'd leave that to the rest of the testers and leave that to the community that was doing that. And what we're left with, not that I'm blaming them, I'm just saying that what the final product we have is the exact same thing. So everyone talked about how, I mean, we don't mind bounties, but like they're super grinding, take like multiple hours, and some players don't have like the time commitment to spend 20 hours trying to get their gear done, and which I completely relate to that, because especially the same thing, there's not that major of a discount between the servers, so I'm going back to the US server now to farm my gear, and it's like, okay, now I'd either run the bounties another like 10 to 14 hours to get my stuff. So then we come to this DLC, and then we're looking at the prices on the marketplace, or not the marketplace, but on the vendors, and it's like, well, what the hell? they went up. So if you look at the catalyst from like the titanium metachan, or the lightning stone, or the ferrofluid, all those are more expensive than like the Hermes, Apollo, and Aphrodite, Apollo, I don't know, whatever, the boons from the previous DLC. So all those prices went up. The elite weapon went up to 800. And then, so if you look at it, if you want just the elite weapons, so if you want like because the feat's tied to it too, so if you want the elite neck, the elite rings times 2, and the elite weapon, which is usually the starting point, because why would you waste marks on a regular face, neck, and rings when you know there's the elite versions? You're just wasting marks. You might as well just keep a blue or purple in there until you get the elite ones, because it doesn't require any renown. It just requires bounty farming. So really, if you're looking at the best investment in your marks, you're not going to buy a regular weapon. You're going to buy the elite, just because Aid has way better stats. It's elite counting towards your elite affinity procs, and it's the same marks. So when you look at it, it's 2,000 time beacons. So the weapon's 800, the neck was 600, and then the 2 rings are 300 each, so 600 for those. So 2,000 time beacons. When you do the math, it's the same thing. 2,000 time beacons, we get 48 per rotation. So we get, if you have the augments, you get 10 per rotation or 10 per boss. If you don't have the augments, you have 8. So you get 10 for Lightning Lad, you get 10 for Cosmic Boy, and you get 10 for Saturn Girl, and then you get 18 for Vladis. So it's the same thing as 48. So 48 into 2,000. It's the same thing. You're looking at was that 83 or something like that, and then 83 or whatever, probably some decimals in there, and then you're looking to multiply that by how many hours, and then it works out to be the same. It's like 20 hours to get the weapons. So do I really want to spend 20 hours on these bounties, farming for the weapon, the rings, and the neck? I mean, who in the right mind wants to do that? I mean, it's not like these bounties are interesting. You pop them. It takes the same amount of time. It takes almost pretty much a half an hour because there's still so much waiting time between Vladis. There's still waiting time between like Lightning Lad and all these ones to spawn. So you're still waiting. I mean, yeah, I understand that you're not always going to have like 20 or 30 people in the instance or the phase to help kill these. So they're designed to be drawn out a little bit longer. But at the same time, you're going to realize that, at least in the beginning, you're always going to have popular phases because that's what everyone's doing. So it's just 20 hours on this, and that's not even including the OP phase. And then someone did the math on the OP phase, and it's going to be another 2,000 marks. So we're looking at 4,000 time beacons to get our gear, not to mention all the stuff they're going to put on the vendor later as like extra, the extra auras and extra materials and stuff, and the orbitals or whatever is going to be in there for extra feats. So we're going to need thousands more. But just right now we need 4,000 time beacons. 4,000 time. That's like 35 to 40 hours worth of farming. Who the hell wants to spend 35 to 40 hours worth of farming? Like, who's the right idea of like a good time is like, hey, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to hop on DC. And you know what I'm going to do on DC? I'm going to farm bounties for 6 hours. Like, I'm not doing old raids. I'm not doing feats. No, it's you're hopping on DC. Bounty time. First thing you do when you log online, go to the LFG. Invite for Legion spam. Bounty phase spam. Invite. It's just, this is not what DC Universe Online should be. And this is not the way. Like, I understand that they're trying to get stuff to fill our time. But having to log on with the prospect of that I need to do this for like 10 hours and I'm not going to make any progress unless I spend the 10 hours on that is ridiculous. So I'm not saying that bounties in general should go away and we go back to what they were before, but they need to be spread out at least. You can't go from like Wonderverse needing like tens, like I think they said something like 60 to 80 hours or something like that to get everything. We can't go from one DLC there to a next one and that requires the same amount of time investment. Like, that's crazy. And it's not even interesting content. It's like literally boredom. Like, if I didn't have like a second monitor to have movies to watch, I wouldn't know what to do. I would literally sit back in my chair, keep hitting one button on my mouse and keyboard just to hit like some damage powers to get credit. Or I would pop in and do a tank and then I'd just keep hitting aggro or something like that. Like, literally, it's enough to kill you out of boredom. Like, I can't imagine like any like PS player just sitting here doing like nothing and being really focused on the bounties. Like, I would literally have to have a movie up or listen to music or something. Like, it's literally the most mind-numbing content to run these bounties endlessly because it's the same thing. It's not like any changes. And then you have to do like 60 to 70 rotations of it just to make any progress to get somewhere. I mean, if every single weekend, if they're going to do like a bonus weekend, then that's fine. Maybe they take away the bonus weeks and bring it just to the weekends where if you can play on the weekend, you get double, triple times every single week. But it's just, honestly, it's ridiculous. And then if you want to do alts, it's the same thing. It's not like they're account bound. You have to keep buying, keep doing bounties on alts. So it's really, DC Bountyverse Online is one of the worst things that's happened to the game so far, in my opinion. It's not so much the bounties, it's the concept, it's the execution. There should never, if it's going to be every other DLC or like every third DLC, that's fine. Every single DLC having a content that requires like dozens and dozens and dozens of hours, literal hours of commitment is ridiculous. And there's no way around that. So that's my 2 cents on the bounties. Now, in terms of the actual DLC itself and how I thought that the loot and raid content were kind of like an afterthought. I don't know what the issue was in terms of this DLC, if it was just that this is the first DLC with COVID-19 with them all working from home, so maybe it was presented some challenges. I'm sure it did. But I don't know why it felt so rushed. Like, I understand that after like Wonderverse comes out, they're working on this. But at the same time, when this hit test server, it was okay. Everything's new on test. We're going to try this out. And then like the elite raid was delayed, and then the one of the artifacts was delayed, and then we had the feats were delayed, which makes sense. But then the next week they're like, oh yeah, the DLC is going to launch on like November 5th. It's like, what? I don't think people understand, but the elite alert or the elite raid came out. No, was it the alert? I know it was the raid. So at least the elite version of the raid came out October 27th. And the raid went, and this DLC went live on November 5th. October 27th to November 5th. That's how much testing we had. And do you really think they're focusing on testing and feedback on like the second or third of the week before, like a couple days before the DLC goes live? No. I mean, at that point, they're like, this is done. We'll focus on hotfixes later. So that's why the Elite Alert and Raid only saw one hotfix. One. Just one hotfix on test server. And then it was done. And the reason why, I've gotten dozens and dozens of messages from people in game and my YouTube comments on Discord about, hey, can you do a video on the new artifact? I would love to, but the developers decided to shut down test server as soon as the DLC came out. So let's wind this back. So we have the shortest duration of a DLC on test server that I've seen in years. It was basically like a week and a few days. So we're going to have the most rushed episode on test. And then after that episode comes out, we're going to shut down the test server so no one else can go on. Where's the thought process there? I don't understand. So we have a new artifact that people don't know how to use. It's not like you can level the thing up to you're going to spend, $250, $300 to level it up just to see how it works? No. And even asking me to do that. Because, yeah, I could level up to like 120 and show you, but that's not the same thing. I need to be able to show you exactly what it does at the higher ranks too, because that's where it's most effective. So I would have to spend $250 to $300 just to level this up, just to use it in a video. But at the same time, this artifact, since it's a hybrid artifact, I need to show multiple powers, because there's going to be powers where it doesn't work as well with like Earth or Light or Atomic with a combo based. And then you're going to have to show powers like on the Prec spec to see how it fills the bar versus Prec versus Might. And I can't do that with like 4 or 5 different power spec tokens. So not only do I have to spend $300 getting the artifact at $200, I also have to spend like $50 or $60 on power spec tokens just so I can show you multiple angles. So that's exactly what the test server is designed for. And we can't use that because they shut it off for some unknown reason. I don't know if they're waiting for the Christmas season to come out. That's a complete joke. I mean, because that's going to be another probably 2 weeks before that's on test server, and then the Christmas season comes out like first week of December. I mean, it's mind-numbingly frustrating to have a situation like that where an artifact is delayed. It's on test server for like a week, and then all of a sudden, like, I have to fit in. I mean, this is just me personally, but I have to fit in like all my raid feedback, all my alert feedback. I have to fit in like open world stuff just running myself. I have to fit in doing with the feats, or if their feats have to be changed. I have to do with the other 2 artifacts. I have to do all this in like a week because they decided to rush the shit out of it to a live server. So where am I left with? So I'm left holding, So that's the frustrating part about it being on test server. So and then to top things off, we had all these bugs and glitches when it came out. I mean, the naked glitch wasn't on test server, so I mean, I can't really speak about that. But it's the same thing. Or they rush something out, and then there's massive glitches that doesn't get fixed for like the first hotfix was like the 10th, so like it was like 5 or 6 days later after the DLC came out that they got that fixed. And the people were using it to exploit money. They were using it to exploit XP. They were using it to. There was numerous different exploits. Because every time you knew you're going to DC because you switched armories and went naked, and then you knew exactly the countdown started, so you knew exactly what you could do, and it would roll back everything else. So it's just, I don't know. I mean, sometimes it's hard to keep the faith, and I'd like to give like the benefit of the doubt a bunch of times, but I mean this DLC in terms of Long Live Legion was just a complete swing and a miss for me. Like the other aspect of it is we have a DLC that's supposed to last months, like I'm sure whatever 2, 3, at least 3 or 4 months in the cycle. So we're looking at probably like January, or like we're looking at like February or something for probably another DLC, something like that. But in terms of that cycle, what we have an alert, we have a raid, and then we have like 40 hours worth of bounties. So the alert, the regular version takes like 15 minutes. The elite version takes like 18 minutes. There's no difficulty in it. it's almost impossible to fail. I mean, the first time we did it was just like a DPS, 2 DPS, a healer, and a tank. It was just like straightforward, done. I mean, this is it. And then the raid, we go from Fractured Godsphere Elite, which actually was difficult. It wasn't beat. No one beat it for like the first 4 or 5 days worth of it being out. Probably I think 4 days, and then it took like a week pretty much for everyone to beat it, or like the end game leagues. And then you still feats like a Mega Pardon. You had feats like the no death feats that actually took time to get. So you had to learn mechanics of it. It was difficult content. Yeah, there's some bugs when it came out, but I mean, at the same time, it was still completable. But I mean, at the same time, then we go from Fractured Godsphere to Convergence of the Unmaking. And then what? So Convergence of the Unmaking, first boss, if you solo tank it, yeah, there's a chance you could die. I mean, but if you 2-tank it, I mean, it's impossible to die or possible to fail first boss. Second boss, I mean, it's impossible to die. I mean, unless you just walk into the AoE fields, it's completely straightforward. And then we look at Mordru in the final boss. The only way you can die is if you fall off a bunch of times, being pushed back, which is like more like an RNG stuff, where you get hit by the balls or being like transformed into like the tree or rocks or whatever, and get hit by balls. So we go from something that's legit difficult in terms of Fractured Godsphere to something that's incredibly easy, and just after you run it a bunch of times, it's like it just gets boring. So we have an alert and we raid, and there's just no content in this DLC. We're forced to run the bounty for 40 hours because there's nothing else to do. Once the alert's done, once the raid's done, I mean, that's it. You run the alert, you do the daily missions, 5 minutes to do the daily missions. You run the alert, takes like 15, 20 minutes. You run the raid once a week, which takes like, half an hour. And then you do bounties. So it's just, these are my feelings on it. I don't know why they're going with the DC Bountyverse Online nowadays. I would rather much have either 2 raid. If you're going to have a raid that's like pretty much piss easy, you have to have 2 raids. You can't just have 1. I mean, when you look at it, like say like Olympus DLC, you had Olympus, which was an easy raid, but then at least Gods and Monsters was somewhat difficult in the lead. It wasn't really interesting because it just amplified the mechanics, but the same thing. You had one elite raid that was difficult in Gods and Monsters, and you had another elite raid that took like 10-15 minutes in Olympus. So if you're going to have some kind of boring content where no one wants to run it, you got to have 2. Same thing with the alert. If you're going to have an alert that's like this easy, you got to have at least like a duo or solo just to kind of like weed out the time and kind of expend it. You can't just have everyone focused on doing bounties. So I know this is kind of a long commentary. I wanted to cover a bunch of different topics because it's been on my mind. It's been on other people's minds, telling me it's like, hey, Obsidian, you get the devs to change. Like, why am I doing bounties? Why am I wasting my time doing bounties? I don't want to do 40 hours worth of bounties. So it's like the rhetoric that I'm hearing for the community is the exact same each time. No one's like, hey, I love to log on and do 6 hours worth of bounties every single night. I've yet to find a single person that said, hey, I love doing this. So leave your comments in the comment section, how you guys feel about it, and then let's see if we can continue that conversation there. So take care, guys. We'll see you in the next video.